Sheldon SquarePants is the epitome of modern SpongeBob fatigue. The episode is full of cheap references, contrived character moments, and just an all-around desperation to do something interesting with its plot and animation. Yet, behind all of that, I think there was an episode that could have been a good story. Right out the gate, this episode tries way too hard to convince us it's a real wacky show. We open on SpongeBob and Patrick playing upside-down checkers. Ooh, look how quirky our characters are. So there are two problems with having this episode start with this upside-down checkers thing. The first problem is that it just isn't that clever. They're playing checkers, but they're standing on their heads. I don't know, man. Kind of a weak concept if you ask me. The other problem is that this upside-down checkers thing doesn't meaningfully tell us anything about the characters that is relevant later in the episode. To compare upside-down checkers to the wacky game that they play in the beginning of Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, the game they play in that episode has all of these crazy, seemingly incoherent rules that make perfect sense to the characters, but not to us. This moment works not only because it's much more creative than What If Normal Game but Upside Down, but also because it informs us of who these characters are. The game they are playing is unpredictable, and then later on in the episode, when Squidward convinces them he's a ghost and they must serve him, their unpredictability, as established in this opening scene, becomes the element of their characters that punishes Squidward, since their unpredictable nature makes them poor servants. With that in mind, what does Upside Down Checkers tell us about these characters? Well, we can count Patrick out because he isn't even a major player in this episode, but what about SpongeBob? I mean, one could argue that SpongeBob's wacky way of playing this game reflects how unpredictable he is later in the episode when him playing with Plankton ends up causing Plankton harm, but SpongeBob's actions later in the episode don't line up with how he's established. His later actions, such as throwing a baseball too hard or messing up this lawnmower, are just typical oblivious cartoon character actions, which doesn't really work well with the upside-down checkers establishing moment, which communicates a more reserved level of quirkiness with no hint of obliviousness at all. And lastly, Plankton is not present in the scene where SpongeBob and Patrick play upside-down checkers, as opposed to Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, where he actually witnesses and comments on the absurdity of their game. In that episode, the game serves as almost a warning to Squid, as it shows him how unpredictable his neighbors can be. So when he, knowing that, still goes ahead and manipulates them anyway, his narrative punishment becomes that much more deserved. Plankton, on the other hand, didn't see this game, and thus is not properly introduced to who SpongeBob is in the episode, giving him no warning about his unpredictable nature, even if the upside-down checkers game were a good way of communicating that in the first place. And I know what you might be thinking. Doesn't Plankton already know SpongeBob? Shouldn't him being familiar with his antics in previous episodes be enough? And to that I say, well, you could say the same thing about Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, yet that episode went out of its way to use its opening to properly establish its characters, and it was all the more better for it. All this over-analysis of literally the first shot of the episode to say that this opening doesn't take the opportunity to inform you about the characters, and instead just spits out, what if the characters play checkers standing on their heads, just so it would have something remotely interesting to put on the screen. Then SpongeBob gets a phone call and he opens up his face to reveal a phone. Again, with the overcompensation. Modern SpongeBob does this a lot, where they have characters do overly cartoonish things in a way that doesn't serve the story or the characters. SpongeBob having a phone inside of his body doesn't tell us anything about him. It's just another quirk of the world that makes it slightly more interesting to look at than if SpongeBob went and picked up a regular phone on the table. If you want to see an example of this sort of moment done well, look no further than this scene in Bubble Buddy, where Mr. Krabs pops out of the cash register to demand Squidward serve Bubble Buddy. By having Mr. Krabs pop out of the cash register, rather than just say, come through the door of his office, it gives Mr. Krabs this sense of omnipresence and helps immediately establish the power dynamic. Usually, in a cartoon, a character being able to break the laws of physics directly correlates to their level of power over a situation, something that does not apply to the phone scene. Also, Mr. Krabs being a money-loving, greedy archetype makes it feel appropriate that a cash register is the place where he would pop out of. What is it about SpongeBob that would make him the kind of person that would have a phone inside of his body? Well, nothing. because this moment means nothing. And then after SpongeBob leaves, we get another big helping of nothing when Patrick eats the checkerboard. What a hilarious and important thing for us to be shown. SpongeBob is then informed that his parents have a surprise for him, so he heads over to Avocado Acres, where his parents live. So this isn't the first time SpongeBob's parents living in an avocado house is established, as it was first shown in the episode Ma and Pa's Big Hurrah, but I haven't made a video about that episode, so I'm gonna complain about the avocado thing here. Now look, my issue with the avocado thing isn't so much that it retcons that SpongeBob's parents lived in a real house beforehand, as seen here in the episode Blackjack. I think shows are fine to make little changes like that, and hey, maybe his parents just moved, whatever, it's not a big deal. What is a big deal is the fact that his parents also live in a fruit. And yes, an avocado is a fruit. Look, I get the logic. SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, so his parents live in an avocado. I just feel like these avocado houses kind of rob SpongeBob's pineapple house of the thing that makes it special, it being that SpongeBob is the only character to live in a house that is also a fruit. In addition to that, SpongeBob's parents are supposed to represent a bit more normalcy compared to their more wacky son. SpongeBob's parents have never really been a major part of the show, probably to help set it apart from other family shows where the main character's parents are also major characters. So when SpongeBob's parents are around, they usually play the role of the straight man, the normal, regular parents of a quirky son. And in this episode, they still absolutely fill that role, but also they live in an avocado. You know, like SpongeBob living in a pineapple, it's a weird choice of house, but SpongeBob is a weird guy, so it makes sense. And I just think that this weird guy's normal parents should live in a normal house. Anyway, avocado rant over. I also sort of take issue with the fact that SpongeBob's parents live in a retirement community, as I feel it removes a little bit of ambiguity from SpongeBob's age. Like, SpongeBob is always canonically an adult, we all know this, but his actual age is left intentionally ambiguous because to reveal his age would undermine either his childishness or his adult-like qualities, depending on what the actual age ended up being. We can reasonably assume that SpongeBob is between 18 and 32, 35 at the absolute maximum, but if his parents are in a retirement home, well then he either had older parents or he's much older than I thought. Like usually you'd be like, what, in your 70s if you're in a retirement home? So I guess if SpongeBob was 35 and he was born when they were 35. Okay, you see the problem here? Now, with this retirement community nonsense, I'm here questioning SpongeBob's age when otherwise the show does such a good job at making me not question it at all. Okay, so on to the inciting incident of the episode. Yep, we're only on the second scene. What can I say, folks? I like to be thorough. So the premise of this episode is that Plankton sat himself on the SquarePants doorstep in a baby carriage and they adopted him, making him SpongeBob's brother. Plankton's motivation being that since brothers share everything, SpongeBob will share the Krabby Patty secret formula. I actually don't hate the premise, but man, they could not have botched the execution any worse than they did. So there's like 1 second where SpongeBob says, Plankton? Like he knows that it's Plankton. But after his parents tell him the story, SpongeBob basically is completely oblivious that this is Plankton at all. And the narrative just doesn't explain why. Like, all it would have taken was 2 lines. SpongeBob going, hey, wait a minute, this looks like the guy who always terrorizes my workplace. And his dad being like, nah, son, just because that one Plankton wasn't nice to you doesn't mean all Plankton are like that. And then just have SpongeBob be convinced his new brother is someone who happens to look like Plankton. Or Plankton could use, you know, the limitless science fiction technology at his disposal to disguise himself like he does in just about every other episode like this. I think the reason they didn't go in that route was because they wanted to have Plankton still be Plankton, so there can be a bunch of gags where he gets stepped on, but I don't think it was worth it. Him creating some kind of robot sponge that looks like it could be SpongeBob's brother would have worked better. I feel like the episode is trying to imply that SpongeBob just assumes it's not the Plankton he knows after his parents tell the story, but without actually stating what SpongeBob thinks, it keeps this episode in a weird limbo where SpongeBob seems to simultaneously know and not know that this is Plankton, and it just makes SpongeBob come off as far too oblivious. And look, SpongeBob can be oblivious to something that is obviously Plankton. A great example of this is Imitation Crabs, where SpongeBob falls for the flimsy excuses Plankton makes for his robot crab suit.
Gosh, Mr. Krabs, you don't look so good.
That's just my metal suit. I made it to protect the formula.
But Imitation Crabs at least had Plankton be in a robot crab suit, and the fact that Plankton is in a robot crab suit fits into what Krabs said in an earlier scene.
Just Just remember the most important rule.
Only discuss the secret recipe with Mr. Krabs.
So the robot crabs is a way of getting SpongeBob to possibly reveal the secret formula even within that strict rule set. And while we're on the subject of imitation crabs, you know what else that episode did a lot better? Framing the secret formula as something worth protecting. In fact, if you look at just about any classic SpongeBob episode involving the formula, the narrative makes sure to take time to really make clear to the audience the gravity of how important the secret formula is and why Plankton shouldn't have it. Like this little scene in Imitation Crabs really does make you care about SpongeBob not losing the secret formula.
The Krabby Patty law must be enforced. The future of the Krusty Krab depends on it.
Not only does it establish how much it means to crabs, but it shows how much SpongeBob cares about not letting crabs down.
I will not let you down!
And these emotional foundations make the story stronger. In Sheldon SquarePants, Krabs is not in the episode. The secret formula's importance is not established, nor is the audience made to care about whether or not Plankton gets it. And most importantly, SpongeBob is such an oblivious blank slate that the audience is not made to care about his emotional connection to the mission of protecting the formula. So then we get into the Plankton torture. Now, I know Squidward torture is a pretty infamous element of the show, as discussed in my Squidward torture video, link in the description. And in that video, my main point was basically that torturing a character is really only okay if the negative things that are happening to that character reflect the perspective that the story is trying to communicate. So while the Plankton torture in Sheldon SquarePants does technically fit this description, with Plankton being dishonest in an attempt to steal the secret formula, so this is his punishment, I still find the Plankton torture to be a bit gratuitous. I just think that stealing the formula is so inherently baked into Plankton's character at this point, there really needs to be a much more evil action committed in order for such torture to be justified. Like, all he did was pretend to be a baby or whatever. And yes, it's pretty much identical to something like Imitation Crabs, where he pretended to be Mr. Krabs, but in that episode, Plankton's only punishment was that he blew up. And while literally exploding is probably worse than getting hit in the eye with a baseball, in the realm of cartoon world, the baseball to the eye is going to seem worse than an explosion. And not only that, in Imitation Crabs, the crab robot explosion was so much more the fault of Plankton, with it being the self-destruct 1-cent coin slot that he installed that made it go boom. Whereas, sure, in Sheldon SquarePants, he caused a lot of this torture to happen by just putting himself in the vicinity of SpongeBob, since Plankton's actions were so little and the torture administered to him throughout the episode so much greater. I just find it to be nothing more than a bunch of pain happening to the character for no other reason than to have some sort of action fill the screen time. A common theme in this episode. But would it really be a modern SpongeBob episode if we didn't have a crowbarred-in reference to a past episode? What's it gonna be? Yes, the old lady and her comically even older mother from Chocolate with Nuts. So there's a scene where SpongeBob volunteers Plankton to mow their lawn, and there is just absolutely no reason for this scene to contain these reference characters other than for it to just be a reference. It could have just been any old lady. In fact, a random old lady would have been better if you ask me, because unless you know the original reference, it doesn't make sense as to why this character exists at all. Like, think about it. If you've never seen Chocolate with Nuts, you'd probably be like, why is there a shriveled up little meatball person here? Because her existence is not predicated by the actual context from her original episode. See, in Chocolate with Nuts, this character is the punchline of a joke. That joke being that SpongeBob and Patrick, who are trying to schmooze customers into buying their candy bars, say to this clearly old lady,
"Is your mother home?"
And to their surprise, her mother is in fact alive, and she looks like this. This is not only a hilarious bit of misdirection, but it also leads into their lie that they use to try and peddle their chocolate bars.
Rub it on your skin, and it makes you live forever. No.
And then the pair return for the final punchline of the episode, where after SpongeBob and Patrick strike it rich, they use the money to take the two of them out on a date to a fancy restaurant.
So, how long have you two ladies known each other? What? What did he say?
It's because of these details that there is absolutely no reason to ever bring back this character. The entire existence of this character is predicated on the misdirection that this old lady's mother is still alive. as soon as the episode ends with us knowing that this mother exists, any attempt to bring her back will result in it falling flat as nothing more than a cheap reference. It's like what I said about Nosferatu or Bubble Buddy. The entire existence of these characters revolves around how they are revealed to exist. And once that reveal happens, there is no longer any use for them in a narrative. Then the episode takes a bit of a turn when Plankton encounters this clown guy. At first, I thought this was just going to be some run-of-the-mill guy is afraid of clowns moment, but I actually find Plankton being afraid of clowns to make a lot more sense, since clowns have big shoes and Plankton is always getting stepped on. The clown scene shows SpongeBob standing up for Plankton, which shows Plankton that one of the perks of having a big brother is having them protect you. After this, Plankton starts to actually embrace being SpongeBob's brother, and seems to even be having fun in their activities. For some reason, the episode still tortures Plankton here, which not only is mean-spirited, but it undermines the message of the episode. Even though the torture in the early scenes was gratuitous, if it were handled a little better, I think it could have worked to communicate that Plankton is doing something wrong. But during this montage, Plankton is doing the right thing. He's embracing brotherly love with SpongeBob, which is the thing that the episode is saying that you should do. So why is Plankton also getting punished here? I feel like because Plankton is the villain, for some reason, the show will just punish him for no reason. The show does this with Squidward too, but I actually might argue it's even worse when it happens to Plankton. And the reason I think that is because since Plankton is the villain, seeing him fail should feel much more earned. And his failure should directly be the result of his own hubris or because a competent hero outwitted him. When a villain gets beaten up for just existing, it robs his actual defeat of having any meaning, and it also muddies when the villain actually may be making a change for the better, like it does in this scene. After this montage, we get to what might be the best scene in the episode, where Plankton admits how even with how many brothers and sisters he had, they weren't nice to him, which is a nice callback to how Plankton's family is so different from him. One could say that Plankton's family is actually pretty nice. I mean, look at how willing they are to help him in Plankton's army. However, I can believe that Plankton would feel this way, considering how different he is from his family. However, even if you aren't aware of Plankton's family ties, this line still works all on its own, as Plankton just saying that he never felt the same way about his actual brothers as he does for SpongeBob is a really nice moment. The only thing that makes this moment weaker, however, is how much SpongeBob is barely a character in the story. Like I said earlier, his obliviousness just makes it hard for us to empathize with him, and the episode gives us no insight into who he is or what he cares about. If there was more to SpongeBob, the emotional connection of this moment would feel stronger from both sides. After Plankton opens up to SpongeBob, it is revealed that the brotherly love meter is now full, and SpongeBob is ready to share his secrets. While I have so much of an issue with a lot of this episode, I do think that this moment is really nice because it makes Plankton actually earn the thing that he wanted. It's communicated that Plankton wasn't even thinking about the formula anymore, and usually when Plankton stops prioritizing the formula, he gets rewarded. Of course, SpongeBob's big secret isn't actually the formula, so the reward doesn't last too long. SpongeBob's actual secret is that his tie isn't actually a tie, it's a clip-on. Now, I know the main criticism of this moment, SpongeBob has been shown tying his tie in previous episodes, so this is a retcon, but like, come on, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, is SpongeBob's tie really that much of a plot point? Sure, it's a major part of his costume, but how many episodes are actually about his tie? From what I can think of, this is probably the only time in the show that SpongeBob's tie is a major plot point in the episode. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And with that in mind, I think that not only is the retcon earned, but the actual reveal is unexpected enough that I think it is a satisfying piece of misdirection. So when Plankton asks about the formula, to which SpongeBob reveals he can't just simply reveal the formula because it's locked in a specific brain vault. By the way, I like that the guard of the brain vault is Mr. Krabs, but I don't like that Mr. Krabs doesn't appear in the episode otherwise. I do feel that it's important for Krabs to at least make an actual physical appearance in formula-stealing episodes, even if the primary protector of the formula is SpongeBob. I mean, it's his recipe after all. Then Plankton pulls out a chainsaw to get into SpongeBob's brain vault, but SpongeBob's dad then straight up disowns him in what is a very mean-spirited scene. Like, seriously, in the parents' mind, this is some baby they decided to adopt, and then they just abandoned him over nothing? Okay, I guess he tried to cut open SpongeBob with a chainsaw, but Come on. In the world of cartoon logic, that's like the equivalent of hitting your brother too hard with a pillow. It's grounds for a stern talking to and maybe boarding school at worst. This moment makes SpongeBob's parents really unlikable. And the only reason this happens is because the episode just kind of needed to end and find some sort of reason to make Plankton not be SpongeBob's brother anymore. And I guess this is what they went with. Couldn't they have just somehow figured out that Plankton is an adult man and not a baby? Like, that would have given them a pretty valid excuse to disown him, but no, they actually decide to have the parents just be like that. It's a perfect example of how not understanding how to properly tie together your plot can just lead to creating extremely mean-spirited moments like this. But I talk more about that in my mean-spirited SpongeBob episodes video, a link in the description. Then the episode ends with a reference to the Patrick Star Show where an absolutely lobotomized Patrick tortures Plankton with the checkerboard from the beginning. It's not too undeserved of a reference, to be fair, as if it were written a little better, it would have fit well into the episode, what with all the parents and brothers theming. But I mean, it's a bad modern SpongeBob episode. What do you expect? I also noticed that Cecil and Bunny, that's Patrick's parents' names, by the way, are portrayed as noticeably elderly here, which is strange because in SpongeBob and Patrick's timeline twist-up, which takes place in this same time period, portrays them identically to how they look in the Patrick show. I guess because they used them in this episode for a quick cameo, they aged them up. But then when they made the timeline twist up, since they were a more major part of that episode, they wanted them to be a more standard age rather than being elderly. If I had to guess, I think it's because in timeline twist up, Grandpat is present, whereas in Sheldon SquarePants, he isn't, which considering the parents are old, I would assume the writers thought at this point that Grandpat was perhaps no longer with us. But then they decided to retcon Cecil and Bunny's advanced age and have Grandpat be alive in this timeline. Honestly, I'm not against this retcon. Like I said earlier, I don't think SpongeBob's parents should be portrayed as elderly, and I feel the same way about Patrick's parents. I just think it's interesting to point out, as it's an example of the team behind the show not being all the way sure of how they want to use the characters just yet. So, Sheldon SquarePants, while it definitely isn't a good episode, does have something that many modern SpongeBob episodes don't. Actual themes. The story is clearly communicating themes of brotherly love and tries to teach a lesson about putting relationships over ambition. The problem is that so much of the episode is bogged down by nonsense. The random animation choices, the cheap reference to the old lady, the gratuitous Plankton torture. The episode is 1% decent emotional storytelling and 99% hot gas. I really would have liked to see this explored more. The idea of SpongeBob and Plankton just hanging out and being friends is not something that happens too often, and for good reason. The fact that SpongeBob and Plankton are usually enemies makes episodes where they are friends, like fun, more meaningful. SpongeBob is a character who represents overwhelming positivity and optimism, and the fact that he would even give Plankton, the representation of evil, a chance at friendship is a testament to his character and a lesson for how we should respond with love even to the most wretched and evil of creatures. But in this episode, the narrative refuses to confirm or deny if SpongeBob even understands if this is Plankton, and reduces SpongeBob to an oblivious yellow blob that goes through the motions, occasionally administering some kind of pain to our poor little copepod. SpongeBob choosing to love his new brother isn't any sort of virtue on his part, because SpongeBob has been given no reason not to love him. But if SpongeBob actually had to overcome having to treat who was once his enemy as a brother, that would have made for a much more compelling episode. So my rewrite proposal for this episode is a simple one. Instead of SpongeBob just obliviously accepting Plankton as his brother, Plankton would instead create a robot Sponge Brother suit to trick SpongeBob's parents. With this setup, one would expect that Plankton would go through the motions and then get revealed at the end like any other similar story like this. However, the twist would be that SpongeBob figures out it's Plankton earlier, and instead of ratting on him to his parents, he uses the opportunity to embrace having Plankton as a brother. This gives both characters a meaningful arc, and the ending could be similar to Fun, where Plankton isn't able to resist the allure of the secret formula and ends up getting found out by SpongeBob's parents, who then disown Plankton for better reason, which reverts everything to the status quo while still leaving SpongeBob as the righteous character who did the right thing. With that foundation, the episode would still need a lot more work in terms of writing better jokes and tightening up the plot, but I think even with that minor change, we can already see the absolute missed potential of Sheldon SquarePants. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in another similar discussion about poor writing, check out my Squidward torture video. Or if you want to see some of my live stream segments, you can check out this video right here. If you like what I do and want to see more of it, please consider becoming a channel member or supporting my Patreon. See you next time.